Welcome. So today I would like you, all of you, the short story about the study that has been done recently, and the study an attempt to understand the long-term forest fire histories of boreal landscape. As you probably know, in the boreal Europe, the vast majority of dendrochronological research and the reconstructions have been carried out in Fennoscandia, while the data from the eastern section of boreal biome remain limited. And to address this knowledge gap, we dendrochronologically reconstructed the 600 years fire history of a middle boreal pine-dominated landscape in southern Komi Republic in Russia. So this area, the study area, located within the Pechora-Ilich Biosphere Reserve. This is the middle boreal landscape of Northern Europe. And despite its long and, if we can say, extensive settlement history, the area is still sparsely inhabited and under development. For example, although the study area played an important role, an important geopolitical role between the 16th and the 18th centuries, due to presence of three portage routes, for example, like this one, the population densities still, the population densities here were still well below 1% per 1 square kilometer. In total, we sampled 30 sites along the roads of the Pechora-Ilich Biosphere Reserve and its immediate vicinity. So at the first time, I maybe want to remind you how we can do the fire history reconstruction. The fire history reconstruction included a few steps, which began with field data collection. For this study, we use a chainsaw to extract a partial cross-section from living trees and stumps to develop a fire chronology. Field sampling was carried out in two field work seasons, in summer of 2004 and 2016. All wood samples were air-dried, glued and sanded up to 400 grit sandpaper to obtain a clear view of the annual tree rings and fire scars. Then we scanned samples with high resolution, with high DPI resolution, and measured rings width using special tools, for example, Q-Recorder and C-Dendro program packages. We use a combination of newly developed pine chronology and a local pointer years, to cross-date our deadwood samples. Then we dated fire scars by binocular, and we assigned the calendar year. For example, you can see it here. We assigned the calendar year and, when possible, the fire season to each fire. And we identified the position of the position of fire within the annual tree rings. Depends of our position of tree rings. Dating of fire scars allowed us to associate the calendar the calendar year with the fire scars and with oldest and youngest tree rings on each sample. And after that, we developed our site-specific fire chronology. To transfer our fire dates obtained at each site level into the our aerial estimate, we assume that each site represented the fire history of a certain area centered on the site center, which we called unit. And by summarize the areas of these units for years when we know when fire exactly happened, we obtained the annual chronology of burned areas. Since some of these units had a portion of, as you can see, has a portion of they are covered by water, for example, by lakes or by streams, but we not include the peatlands, for example. We just counted this area, and the contribution of the annual amount of burned area was reduced according this counting. Then we converted the reconstructed burning areas into the fire cycle estimates and evaluated the fire cycle, the change of fire cycle by shift detection algorithm. And here you can see our result. The regime shift detection algorithm revealed considerable historic variability in the fire activity. The early period had a fire cycle about 66 years, followed by a period of an increased fire activity, this one, and then 2 periods with progressively decreasing fire activity. Since the 1960s, the estimated fire cycle was about 153 years. This is the longest, the longest fire cycle over the last 600 years. Here on the picture, you can see that yellow bar is represent like the period of village establishment, which we can, this data was obtained from historical, some historical documents, and as you can see, fire cycle did not reveal changes associated with the colonization waves. The increase in fire activity, that means the shortening in the fire cycle, occurred about half of century earlier, around 1610. Then the first village was established, which marked like the onset of yellow bar. And in contrast, we observed the decline in fire activity in 1960s, and we suggest that this decrease likely was associated with the human activity and reflected the onset of a fire suppression era and the increased amount of timber value. This observed pattern is broadly similar to the pattern observed in the northern hemisphere, in the boreal forests of northern hemisphere, where shortening of fire cycle tends to coincide with the cold period of Little Ice Age. The Little Ice Age period was more prone due to dry and unstable climate of the Little Ice Age. In other words, we can say that in that period, the large amount of forest area burned compared with the previous and following periods. Our study, the problem is that the territory which we studied does not currently possess precipitation or drought reconstructions, which create a few problems for us to find a proxy for historic climate variability in fire-prone conditions. But instead of this, we used early wood with chronology development within the framework of early study as a proxy of drought conditions. We used the 5 largest 5 years and superposed epoch analysis. But at the first time, we tried to check if we have if we really have association between if we have the strong climate signal in our early wood with chronology, and we use a response function analysis. And this analysis confirmed the presence of early and late season drought signals in early wood and late wood pine chronologies, respectively. And then we ran our superimposed epoch analysis, which show us a significant negative departure of pine chronology in the analysis of the 5 early wood large 5 years and 5 late wood large 5 years. This pattern was broadly consistent with the notion of large 5 years occurring during drier than average conditions. So in contrast to fire cycle, we also look at the fire occurrence, and in contrast to fire cycle, a non-significant increase in fire occurrence was associated with the establishment of villages or small harbors on the Pechora River, which marked here on our picture. During the first period, fire occurred at a relatively low rate, and then fire occurrence was maximum during the second epoch, which associated with the village established period. And in the latest period, the number of fires had dramatically declined as compared to previous periods. Additionally, we use a survivorship function, which also showed a non-significant increase in fire occurrence for the period following the village establishment. For example, during the period prior to the village establishment, the site nearest to the village had an approximately 50%, as you can see here, approximately 50% probability of escaping fire after 30 years since the last time it burned. It means that this territory was burned. This probability was an average only 25% after the village establishment dates. So, use of this data, we can say that for the last 600 years, the forest fires has been a common disturbance agent in the pine-dominated forests in the study area. And joint analysis of fire cycle and fire occurrence was association with the seasonal drought proxy, and it suggests that climate was a driver of fire cycle prior to the 20th century, while the human activity was a factor which controlled the decadal fire occurrence. So thank you for your attention.